Hillel Fuld, welcome to Shtark Tank. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Love the name, Shtark Tank. It's a great one.
So we're recording the special pre-Yom Kippur episode where we get ready to go into Shul and say Yizkor and remember all the loved ones we've lost. And it's also the time of year where you remember the yortzeit of Ari Fuld HY Damo. So Hillel, maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about what it was like growing up with Ari. What was your age difference? What was your relationship like? What type of things do you guys like to do growing up together?
Yeah, so we're five boys. Me and Ari, I guess, were the closest in age. We grew up in the same house, meaning my older brothers were already out and married. Ari was he was like the class clown, you know. He had his karate, when he had his hockey that he was into, and he was a big dude, and um, you know, he used that energy to do incredible things. But as a kid, he was like a typical troublemaker, you know.
Yeah. The first I actually heard of him was as a karate teacher. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? He was I think, a fourth degree black belt. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. How did he get into it? What do you think about karate that really touched him so much and connected with him so much?
I mean, yeah, he was into karate since I can remember, basically since he was a little kid. Very dedicated to it, and yeah, he was a fourth degree black belt. His sensei, his teacher, was the man who basically invented the type of karate that he became an expert in. And it was one of his biggest passions. I don't know if you're asking me from like a psychological like perspective of what drew him, I'm not sure, but I think it was one of many ways he channeled his energy. He had a lot of, I would say, an extraordinary amount of energy, which he channeled to karate, he channeled to fighting for Israel, he channeled for the Torah and many of the good things that he became very well known for. But karate was definitely one.
And I once heard you give a very beautiful description of how his karate and the mindset that he was able to develop there influenced his tefillah. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, for sure. When most people pray, most people daven, they shuckle. I don't know when that became a thing, but that's what we do. Ari didn't shuckle. Ari would put himself in a state of Tai Chi meditation, and he was just somewhere else. Just that intensity, and you're literally standing before God in a very real sense. That's how Ari davened. He was just very deep in a meditative state that I have not seen since on anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that a lot because I really struggle with focus and concentration and all of the distractions that we have around us. So the fact that he was able to be such an energetic person, but also be disciplined enough to control his focus and his presence to really be in front of Kadosh Baruch Hu is something very inspiring and something which I try to implement in a tiny way in my life. So we're recording this. It's crazy to think that it's been 6 years since Ari was murdered, and he died a hero's death, saving a bunch of lives in the process. And I want to focus on that angle specifically, meaning there are so many projects that you guys as a family and friends have done to make sure that Ari, even though he was physically killed, but his spirit and his soul and everything he stood for continues very strong. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those main projects?
When he was born, I guess now we're talking about 50 years ago, my parents named him Ari. Ari was not a very common name. Many people called their kids Ari, but as a shortcut for Aryeh, which means lion, right? But Ari was not a very common name. And many people asked my parents, like, where did you get that name from? And they were like, we like the name, like too much thought put into it. But then Ari started to grow up. And as he became an adult, there were some things about him that were, I guess, extraordinary is a way to I guess to coin them or to give them a description, but it was more than that. It was I don't know. It was maybe even supernatural. I don't know what you want to call it, but certain things that he was fiery passionate about. And for starters, Ari came to Israel before we came by himself. Just picked up and moved to Israel, and volunteered for the IDF, climbed up the ranks of the IDF, continued to volunteer in reserves duty, and he got his exemption, and he ripped up those papers and continued to volunteer. Like, he was a real warrior. Like, there's no other way to describe. He was a warrior who conquered this land. That was what he was. That's one. Two, I would wake up, in the middle of the night, and he'd be arguing with some anti-Semite on Facebook, and I'd be like, "What? Go to sleep! Like, this guy's not even listening to you. What are you even wasting your time for?" And that was not like on his radar. Like, sleep? What do you mean? I need to defend Israel. And he just didn't sleep. Like, I don't know when he slept. He was just on all day, every day. That's two. Three, he was obviously a deeply religious person, but there were certain things, certain commandments that he just took way more seriously. Prayer is one of them that we just said. Another thing that he was very passionate about was tzitzis, the mitzvah, the commandment of wearing fringes on a four-cornered garment. He had an ongoing debate with Rav Nebenzahl, I think it was, about Tcheles or not Tcheles. He was very passionate. Like all the pictures on Facebook are with him and the talis on his head. He was very, very passionate about tzitzis. And finally, if you talk about, prayer, he was very passionate about a specific prayer, which is Shema Yisrael, right? Hear, O Israel, Hashem is God, Hashem is one. And again, there are videos of him, I would say characterized Ari. So just before I read you these psukim, which will blow your mind, let's just go over what we just said, right? We said he was a warrior who conquered the land, like legitimately conquered the land. He didn't sleep. He was super passionate about prayer, about tzitzis, and about Shema, right? So the word Ari, which means lion, appears twice in the entire Torah. The first one, I'm reading the pasuk, the verse, and then I'll translate. Karash achav ke'ari, uchelavi mi'ikimenu mevarechacha baruch v'orech arur. I'm reading the translation. They crouch, they lie down like a lion, Ari, like the king of beasts. Who dare arouse them? Blessed are they who bless you, accursed they who curse you. That's the verse, right? Karash achav ke'ari. Now, Rashi, famous commentator on the Torah, has a duty, has a job, which is to define that term. What is an Ari? What is a lion? Now, if I said to you, define a lion, you would say, the king of beasts. You'd say the strongest animal. You'd say many different things that you can say about a lion. But Rashi doesn't say any of that. And I'm reading word for word. Karash achav ke'ari, lay down like a lion. Kitargumo, Rashi says, just like Onkelos, another commentator on the Torah. What is a lion? Yityashvu be'artzam bekoach uvikvura. They will settle their land in strength and might. That is how Rashi explains and defines the word lion. They will settle their land with strength and might. Like, that's a nice coincidence that that's what Ari did. But the second one's even crazier. The pasuk says, Hein am kelavi akum, lo, a people that rises like a lion, v'cha'arit nasa, leaps up like the king of beasts, lo yishkav ad yochal teref, rest not till it has feast on prey and drunk the blood of the slain. Meaning, a lion does not sleep until it consumes its prey. Okay, so he doesn't sleep. Okay, so we have a man who is a warrior and conquered the land with strength and might, and then we have a man who doesn't sleep. And now is a real kicker. Rashi on that pasuk, on that second verse, and this is just bananas. There's no way to explain this. It says, in the morning, they overcome their, Yetzer Hara, their evil inclination, like a lion, as in strong, to grab the mitzvos, to grab the commandments. Now, how many mitzvahs are there in the Torah? 613. Rashi could have given any of those as an example. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not, whatever. What does Rashi say? And I'm reading word for word. In the morning, 3 mitzvos. Livosh talit, to wear the fringes. Likro et shema, to read the shema. Ulaniach tefillin, to wear the tefillin and pray. And my parents were like, what the heck just happened? Like, twice in the Torah it mentions the word Ari, and both times it is literally his biography. It is his life story. And that is just, it's mind-boggling, right? And so Ari, he led a very extraordinary life. He fought all day for his people and his land and his God. And in his last moment, everyone knows he ran after the terrorists and shot him literally seconds before he dropped dead. And yeah, he became a national hero of the state of Israel. And he lived larger than life and died larger than life.
And how do you guys as a family, you guys have done all these projects. So what has been the focus and the strategy in keeping his legacy alive?
Yeah, it's the things that were important to him, right? Obviously, his shul in Efrat, where he, had all his friends and his community, so that's important that we're building that. His life was dedicated to IDF soldiers. Ari was very well known for going base to base with like ice cream and ices and just giving the soldiers, food and drink or whatever it is when they needed it. And so to commemorate Ari, actually one of my closest friends, Donnie Haller, the Haller family in the U.S., along with other people, donated a food truck that's basically drives base to base and just gives soldiers, again, ices, ice cream, whatever they need. And it says, and obviously in his memory on the truck. But, arifuld.org is the organization that, is a funnel to people who want to support Israel and the IDF. Arifuld.org is the organization that they donate to, and that money is then given directly to answer the needs of IDF soldiers.
And what advice would you have to some of the families who are fresh off of their mourning and they want to make sure that long-term the legacy of their loved ones is perpetuated? What type of things have you learned throughout this process?
So without getting political, obviously at the Shiva, many of the politicians came to my parents' house, just to pay their respects, I guess. And Netanyahu came. And, Netanyahu lost his brother, obviously, in Entebbe. And so he came not as the prime minister, but I think he came as someone who lost his brother. And he said to me, we weren't smart enough to write a book about my brother and remember all the stories because the stories were, endless. He said, don't make that mistake. Write a book. These stories about Ari are unbelievable. Write a book. There have been many books written about him, but, I think I, on a daily basis, ask myself, WWAD, what would Ari do, right? When I have a conflict online, respond, engage, don't respond, don't engage, what would Ari do? And so, my work, I feel like I'm carrying out or carrying on his legacy, but, the amount of Sifrei Torah that were written and donated in his name, mikvahs and shuls, and it's literally endless. I mean, we're talking, I don't know the number, but I mean, I'm getting pictures from people on a very regular basis. They're davening in some shul and they send me a picture of, a plaque that says in memory of Ari Fuld. And so there are a lot of amazing things happening around the world in Ari's name.
You mentioned the Shiva. I remember it was quite a crazy scene. Ari was murdered on the 7th of Tishrei, which means that for Shiva, you had the 8th of Tishrei and the 9th of Tishrei, Erev Yom Kippur, and then you went into Yom Kippur. And not only did you have a very short Shiva, which means you didn't have as much time to necessarily sit and process, but the lines were around the block and you didn't really have as much time to speak on a deep level with the people who were coming to visit you. It was really quick, unless you were Bibi. You were having a quick few minutes with Hillel and the family. Do you have any recollections? What you remember feeling at Yom Kippur? We're releasing this episode before Yom Kippur. I'm sure it was the craziest Yom Kippur of your life. So do you remember what some of the things that were going through your mind coming off of that awful week?
So I don't think I've ever spoken about this publicly. I always, pretty much every single year of my life, I was first in shul on Yom Kippur, and I did Tefillah Zaka. Like I'm in shul, I don't know, 40 minutes before Yom Kippur starts. There's like one or two people that join me there, but it's, people start pouring in 40 minutes later. I don't know. I can't explain it to you. It's just Tefillah Zaka always spoke to me. And yeah, I remember that year, I remember where I was sitting in the shul, and I was reading Tefillah Zaka and just breaking down, just completely broke down, in tears. And I don't remember what I was saying to God, but I would imagine I was saying to God, like, what the actual heck? Like, what do you want from me? Like, are you kidding me right now? Here's a guy who dedicated his entire life to you and your people. What the actual heck? So yeah, that was definitely a very, very emotional Yom Kippur. And yeah, when you have a Shiva that's instead of 7 days, 2 days, it's all kind of, scrunched up into those 2 days. It's obviously way, way more intense. So those were definitely very intense days.
Yeah, and this Yom Kippur during Yizkor in Nofel Shemesh, where you daven and my in-laws daven, there will be a new family joining for the Yizkor prayers, the Zimlis family. We'll remember also in this episode, Eli Moshe. And you also had a great relationship with Eli Mo. So can you just give us that angle on what it was like to be a customer of the 16-year-old who built pergolas and decks?
Yeah, so let me just give a little introduction and say that yesterday was 21 years since Dr. Applebaum was murdered with his daughter Nava. I was in Teaneck, New Jersey when that happened, and I remember turning on the news. And now, Dr. Applebaum, I was very good friends with. I am very good friends with his kids, Natan and Yitz, but he used to come to KBY where I was learning, where you're learning, and every Wednesday and learn with his kids, and I would often go back to Jerusalem with him. So I had a lot of alone time with him. I got to know the guy both as a tremendous Talmid Chacham, like off the charts, but also as a obviously incredible, a brilliant doctor. And so I would say I was pretty close with him. And when I read that news, I completely broke down. I don't think I've ever cried before that day as much as I cried that day. My wife said it's the first time she ever saw me cry. That held the record until Ari. And then I was the only brother who didn't speak at the funeral. That's a whole different discussion. But you can watch the funeral. I was just a complete mess. I couldn't speak if I wanted to. And so, those are the first two times that I remember losing someone just absolutely gutted me. And the third time was Eli Moshe. I was at home. Shabbos had just ended, and we were reading the horrible news from Gaza. I think there was 8 soldiers killed or whatever the number was. And I was just lying in my bed, sad about what had happened, but kind of consciously, maybe as horrible as this might sound, thanking God that it's no one that I knew. And then my son, Avia, my 18-year-old, called me right away. I heard there was something wrong in his voice, and he said, "Did you hear?" I said, "What?" He goes, "Eli Moshe niftar. Eli Moshe died." And I'm like, "What? Like what? Just like what? Come again?" Like I didn't register with at all. And then I made the connection, and I'm like, "Oh my God!" And my wife is downstairs, and I called her and told her, and she screamed like at the top of her lungs. I mean, so those 3 things I think are for me, where I really broke down. Eli Moshe, everyone, he was like, everyone knew him in the neighborhood because he was just a good kid. He was just a straight up good kid. It's kind of one of those people that you wonder, like, what's the catch? You know what I mean? Like, he's just a good guy. He's good looking. He's smart. He's friendly. He's menschlich. He's talented as heck. And so, yeah, he was well known for building things in the neighborhood. And I can tell you that for years, we would put up our sukkah and it would just be such a pain. And we were like, we have this backyard. Why don't we build a pergola and it'll be easy? And of course, Ali Moshe came and, took us off like sweating in the hot Beit Shemesh sun, building it for us, never once complained about anything. And really what sticks out is his last interaction with us, which is that he was obviously in Gaza and he wasn't able to come to build our pergola or to help us complete the schach and everything we needed for our sukkah. No one expected him to call us. He's in Gaza. We know that. But he called and he said, I can't come this year. Can I get someone else to come instead of me? We're like, who is this person? So, he was a really, really special kid. And, I can't say I was super close with him. If I could do it again, I probably would be, because I'm sure I could learn a ton from him. But he was just one of those guys that was just positive energy to be around. And he just exuded like good vibes and good energy, and everyone loved him. That's really the bottom line. And, in high school, one of my closest friends, I went to his uncle's like kever, and it was his yard side, and his mom, I remember saying this, and I have the worst memory, but somehow this stuck with me. She said, my brother, was one of the good ones, and Hashem wants the good ones to sit by his kisei hakavod. I remember in high school thinking to myself, that's a little bit of a weird thing to say. But as I grew older and as I see the people that were losing, it's all the good ones. And it seems to me that there is some truth to that. Hashem wants the good ones by him. So that very much applies to Ali Moshe.
Wow. And last question for today. You mentioned that great acronym of WWAD. What would Ari do? And I want to ask you one of those questions because in my mind, looking outside now, on the one hand, the Jewish people have shown incredible strength, resilience, unity at times. On the other hand, let's be very honest. We are wounded. We are traumatized. We are hurting. There are still hostages in Gaza. There are still people evacuated from the north. And the division that we saw before the war seems to be back, maybe in full force. The scale doesn't really matter, but it's definitely still there. So I'm wondering if you could give us a WWAD, what your thoughts are on what Ari would give us as perspective and chizuk during the moment that we find ourselves right now.
Yeah, it's very clear what he would do. I mean, it's what I've been doing the entire war, which is we're deep in it. We're devastated. We're mourning. We're PTSD, whatever you want to call it. We are. Okay, that's a standalone statement that is not negated by what I'm about to say. Purim. Like, what is Purim? One of the happiest days of the year, right? We celebrate, we dance, we drink, we eat, we get dressed up. What was Purim? What was Purim? Purim was infinitely darker than October 7th. Purim was the leader of the world, 127 countries agreeing to annihilate us. That was it. We were finished. We no IDF. We were done. What was Hanukkah? We were done. We were not winning that war. What was Pesach? 210 years of backbreaking slavery. These times were incredibly dark in our history. And here we are celebrating. But if I told you then we would celebrate, you would have said you're nuts. And so we're in it. And so therefore we can't imagine it because it's so deep and so dark. But Ari would guarantee, not even a question, he would be walking around with a big bumper sticker on his head saying, we will dance again. That would be his message. And, and Am Yisrael Chai, I always say, like, Am Yisrael Chai is a nice Karlbach song, but it's also a historical reality, right? We're here. We're the Babylonians, right? That's what he would be talking about. He'd say, I'm going to the base to go hug some soldiers, to go bring them food, but I'm going to relay the message to everyone I speak to that Am Yisrael Chai and we will dance again.
That is a beautiful message, and I appreciate the fact that you made the connection between Purim and Kippurim, and remember that those two holidays are very deeply linked. And Bezrat Hashem, we should be zochet to dance again with Ari and with Eli Moshe and with all the other holy souls who we will remember on this Yom Kippur. Hillel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much.